There it is, so isolated that it makes up its own system, marooned in space as if the other planets have chosen to hide from it. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi talking about the planet of Korriban, also known as Pesagam, also known as Moraband in one of the Clone Wars movies. And this particular planet, just like the planet we talked about in the previous video, is really strong in the Force, but this time it's actually really strong in the Dark Force. Korriban is known as the homeworld of the Sith. Now let's actually start with the system itself before we talk about Korriban. And the system here is called Horuset. If you zoom out, and I'll show you where this is located. If you zoom out, you'll notice that it's actually on the outer rim. It's really far away from everything else. So if this is the center of the galaxy, and this is Titus, and this is Coruscant, Yavin is right here, and here is Horuset. Horuset is located in the Sith systems, and basically this is where a lot of the Sith are. And this system really only has one planet with two ring systems, which is actually really interesting. So this ring system right here has a name. It's called Korriban, and this one on the outskirts is called the Ashes of Kor. And even though it's not really explained in any of the Star Wars legends how these two rings were formed, it's very possible that these were either destroyed planets, basically planets that were destroyed by one of the wars that the system participated in, or very likely that these were actually supposed to form into planets, but something prevented them from doing that. Now, in our solar system, the reason why we have the asteroid belt is because Jupiter, or Jupiter's mass specifically, is actually responsible for preventing from the planets from forming, or the planet from forming. And here, it's very likely that it's actually the force, specifically the force of Korriban, that somehow prevented these two planets from forming. Now, obviously, this is not a scientific explanation. This is more of a Star Wars science explanation. But it's actually quite possible that the force of Korriban is so strong that it prevented these two planets from forming and was essentially the only planet in this particular system. Now, if we zoom in on Korriban, we'll notice that there's actually a lot of moons that it has. We don't really know the names of the moons, so all of these are randomly generated, but it actually has 7 moons, which is really interesting, which means that a lot of the material during the creation of this particular solar system went into... let me just disable this for a second. Went into creation of these moons, and is very likely deposited either inside Korriban or in these moons that it has. And we don't really know much about the system or the moons because most of the Star Wars legends don't really focus on the moons or anything else in the solar system except for the actual Korriban. But all we know is that this particular planet is actually quite massive. As a matter of fact, well, we don't really know its mass, and all of this is actually calculated by the game, but we know its size. Its diameter is about 16,000 kilometers. Also, its gravity is about 1.4 times the gravity of Earth. And we know that 1 year on Korriban is about 2 years on Earth. We also know that this planet has a very arid and dry look, so there's no actual waters or any kind of forest on the surface. It's basically orangey in color, but it's also not particularly warm. It's possibly quite cold actually, because without any water on the surface, it's probably very unlikely that this planet can actually maintain a higher temperature, so it's possibly relatively cold here, kind of similar to deserts on our planet Earth. Now, essentially, this is what the system looks like, and this is what this planet looks like, and let's actually explore this in a little bit more detail by using Star Wars: The Old Republic, because you do get to play on Korriban, and it's actually the first planet that you start on if you start as the Sith. And so this is what Korriban looks like in the game. It's actually relatively beautiful. It's a kind of a desolate place, though. It has lots of mountains, lots of different desert-looking places. But by the time that we experience in the movies, this world actually has been already abandoned after many ancient wars. There's quite a lot of different wars that were fought on this planet, and too many to list actually. But at the same time, this was also a final resting place for many many different leaders of the Sith, and it was actually supposed to be the resting place of Darth Sidious as well, the guy we get to see in a Star Wars movie. He actually came to this planet at some point to try to get more knowledge and more power, but what he faced were the ghosts of the old Sith that actually tormented him to the point of him almost being destroyed. So various spirits of this old Sith are actually still on this planet, and they actually have quite a lot of power. But interestingly, Darth Vader was actually supposed to be buried here, and he even had a tomb that was constructed for him by the slaves that were on this planet. But let's not rush ahead and start with a bit of important history. So here we actually need to know about someone called Darth Bane, and he was the Sith Lord that created so-called Rule of Two, which basically governs the entire Sith mentality. And here it's a really simple rule. The rule is that at any time, anywhere in the galaxy, there's only supposed to be two Sith. There's always the master and there's always the apprentice. Now this is what we get to see in all of the movies, and for this reason Sith actually thought they were the chosen ones in the Force, because there's actually only about 30 of them that we get to know about in the entire Star Wars canon, and that's in comparison to like thousands of Jedi that we get to see. And interestingly, because of this rule of two, with every generation of Sith, they would actually get more and more powerful. So the idea here was that when the apprentice becomes more powerful than the master, the apprentice would then kill the master and would become the new overlord or the new master, and then this master would choose a new apprentice that would hopefully one day gain enough power to do the same to him. So it's actually a really interesting ideology where in order for them to become more powerful, they had to choose the right apprentice, and they knew that they would actually perish. So when Darth Sidious chose Darth Vader, he knew that one day Darth Vader would kill him. And in episode 2 of Star Wars, Palpatine tells Anakin Skywalker about Darth Plagueis, who used to be a really powerful Sith who could even control life, who could actually resurrect people. And he tells him about his apprentice that actually kills him in his sleep. And that apprentice is, of course, Darth Sidious, which obviously means that Darth Sidious became more powerful than Darth Plagueis. And so that's basically how this rule of two and how the entire Sith ideology works. And all of this obviously started on this planet when the first Sith temple and the first Sith order was born. Now, interestingly, Sith actually used to be a race, and specifically they were a race of red-skinned people with little tentacles on their faces. This is actually my character. My character is a Sith. But at some point, after one of the Jedi Wars, and that we're talking about the Jedi Wars, some of the fallen Jedi from Jedi Order came to this planet and actually started to be worshipped by the Sith for their powers, and basically they became like the godlike symbols, and all of these pyramids were built in their honor by the Sith race. And sometime later, after the arrival of these Jedi, they actually started interbreeding with the Sith on the planet and essentially created this new kind of a order that they refer to as the Sith. And so this is how the Sith Empire was born. It was basically the Sith race interbreeding with the Jedi and essentially creating this kind of a mixture of a culture, a race, and a religion. And following many wars and many different conflicts, this is where they've created the Sith Academy, where then a lot of new generation of Sith would actually try to inherit this dark legacy by basically passing different birthright tests and trying to essentially become the most powerful Sith in the universe. But after many years, this planet essentially just became a very big tomb of different Sith Lords that came back to this planet to have it as their final resting place. And so now this planet is essentially filled with various very dangerous creatures mixed with these spirits of the dark Sith. And one of the previous Sith Lords, Darth Plagueis, even talked about this planet as a graveyard for the darkest of Sith Lords, still whispering within their tombs. It shall always be a source of evil, spawning threats throughout the millennia. And in this particular game, in Star Wars The Old Republic, you actually get to experience this Acolyte training. Basically, this is the training you go through to try to become the Sith Master, or at least someone's apprentice. But ironically, for the Acolytes, for the trainees, the Rule of Two doesn't apply. You actually are not supposed to kill your brethren. You're actually even prohibited from trying to kill or betray other Acolytes on this particular planet. And it's actually punishable by death if you're caught trying to sabotage someone else's progress progress, but this doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. As a matter of fact, if you play this game, you'll find out that it happens quite a lot. Another interesting fact about this planet is that at some point Yoda actually came to this planet to try to meditate and find the meaning of life. It's actually a really interesting period of his life, and during this period, Darth Sidious and also another Sith by the name of Darth Tyrannus tried to break him and tried to basically turn him into a Sith. But he managed to pass these tests and actually became a much stronger Jedi at the end. And before we finish this video, let's briefly talk about some of the fauna and some of the animals and creatures that you can find on Korriban, because a lot of it has evolved to be super scary and super dangerous because of the dark influences of the Force. Now, one of these creatures called Terentatek is actually a Force-sensitive creature that is also super venomous. It's probably one of the more dangerous creatures that you can find on this planet. There's also another Force-sensitive creature called Tuk'ata, and these are sort of like the dogs, I guess the dog version of this planet, except they're of course very evil. There are also very large bat-like creatures called Shyracks that have super sharp teeth. There are also really strange looking lizards called Xyz, which were also Force sensitive and actually had something called dark side poison, which means that if they ever bit you, you would probably die unless you were Force sensitive yourself and could protect yourself from it. So essentially, a lot of these creatures are not only Force sensitive, but are actually really strong in the Dark Force and would usually cause a lot of suffering to their victim, or would actually be attracted to the suffering and would only attack someone who was actually suffering. And I think these creatures kind of give you an idea of what this world is like and what it's like to live on it. And so this is Korriban and also its star Horuset in a nutshell. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and hopefully you learned something from it. And if you did enjoy this video, check out some of the other Universe Sandbox 2 and also Universe Sandbox 2 through Star Wars videos that I posted. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you still haven't, because there's more videos coming. And of course, like this video if you enjoyed watching it as well. Thank you so much for watching, and in the next video we're going to talk about some other planet from Star Wars universe. And as always, game you later and see you in the next video. Bye bye.